I am the solution to your problems. Black Rain is up next on Rediscovered Movies. Hello, welcome to a new episode of Rediscovered Movies. I'm your host, Nomfanelo Malloy. So for this episode, I'm joined by a special guest. It's his first time on the podcast, so please welcome Khalif.
Hey y'all, it's me.
Thank you. And it's a pleasure having you here, Khalif. So we're pretty excited about this one. Well, we'll see what happens. So we're talking about Black Rain. So Black Rain is a 1989 action crime thriller. It's directed by Ridley Scott, who's known for films such as Alien and Blade Runner. The film was written by Craig Bulletin and Warren Lewis. The film stars Michael Douglas, Andy Garcia, and Ken Takakura. So here is the official synopsis. Two New York cops get involved in a gang war between members of the Yakuza, the Japanese mafia. They arrest one of their killers and are ordered to escort him back to Japan. In Japan, however, he manages to escape. As they try to track him down, they get deeper and deeper into the Japanese mafia scene, and they have to learn that they can only win by playing the game the Japanese way. So this movie was released in theaters on September 22nd, 1989. In terms of box office, it has made over $133.8 million worldwide, so about $45.8 million domestic and $88 million international, against a $30 million budget. It opened at number one with $9.6 million domestic. It beat films including Sea of Love, Uncle Buck, and Parenthood. In terms of critical reception, on Rotten Tomatoes, it has a 52% critic score, where they have to say Black Rain has its fair share of Ridley Scott's directorial flair, but its paint-by-numbers story never rises above genre conventions. The audience gave it 55%. The film received 2 Oscar nominations for Best Sound and Best Editing. It won a Golden Horse Award for Best Foreign Film at the Golden Horse Film Festival. At the time of this recording, it is available on video on demand, so check your local provider. All right, so let's start with first discovery. So essentially how you first learned about the movie, your initial thoughts, and has it changed since then? So Khalif, do you want to start?
For sure. So my first discovery of the movie, a friend recommended it to me. You recommended it to me. I watched it, and I typically don't watch like older films and everything like that. Like things that are, outdated. I don't typically, it's not my jam, but I do respect it, and I like to see history of movie and everything, like back when, before they had all the crazy SFX and everything, and it was just people doing things. So it was really interesting and refreshing to watch like a movie from that time. Especially nowadays, when you got Marvel doing everything they're doing.
Oh yeah, it's very CGI heavy these days. Yeah. For sure. So for me, I think I first learned about this movie growing up because I remember growing up with a lot of VHS tapes. I think for one of the movies, they showed promos for this movie. And I thought at the time, because I was young, it looked very intense, especially with like the dark score by Hans Zimmer. So, and then when I got like a free rental from the Cineplex store, I decided to check this movie out a couple months ago. And I thought like the movie was okay. And then rewatching it now for the podcast, I could definitely tell the flaws more for this movie. It does have nice moments, particularly with the action sequences. And I found a review on Letterboxd by YouTuber Patrick H. Willems, which pretty much describes my thoughts about this movie. Where he says, this movie needed way more sweat, sleaze, murder, and rain. So that's pretty much like my general thoughts on this movie. Like, would you agree with that, or?
Not enough rain, for sure. Yeah, not enough rain.
Yeah, for sure. So we could get on to the highlights section, essentially what we liked about this movie. Do you want to start, Khalif?
For sure. So my biggest takeaway from the film, and it's not going to be a typical one for sure. It was back in the 1980s with New York cops, and they have like that whole accent thing going on, and they're all buddy buddy. And my favorite part of the movie, genuinely, is the way they all refer to each other as babe. I thought Charlie and Nikki's relationship phenomenal. So now I'm calling my male friends babe. I'm taking that and adding it to my lexicon. The age of bro is out, and now we're calling each other babes, babes and sweethearts, because you love your friends. You know, that was genuinely my favorite part. Nikki was my favorite part of the movie. His whole character, Andy Garcia, was just really. He's the charming guy, you know. He's like the cop who's just easy breezy. He was like cool with the American people. He was cool with the Japanese people. He's an easy, fun guy. That was my biggest highlight from the movie.
Wow, awesome. Because I think for me, I have the opposite effect. Like, I'll go
You
into the
hated Nikki.
lowlights. I'm gonna go into the lowlights section for that. And but I thought I would say with Michael Douglas, like he did an okay job for me, like in this role. Because
Yeah.
I feel like with this character, he's supposed to be like a tough guy, like with big egos and all that stuff. I don't know if Michael Douglas quite worked for me in that role, but I appreciate the effort. I'll give him that.
He very much seemed like a tough guy. Like the opening shot or opening scene, sorry, was just him racing somebody and winning, you know, being the cool guy right out the gate. But he definitely didn't it felt like he was trying too hard to be a cool guy. You're right.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yeah. So for me, like, what I liked about this movie is essentially this whole like culture clash, like America versus Japan, because we see like with our protagonist, Nick, he tends to break the rules often to achieve his goals.
The
But
American
then when
way.
Yes, exactly. But then when he goes to Japan, like with the police and even to the mafia to extent, like they're all about honoring rules and tradition. And then if you
Hmm.
don't follow those rules, there are consequences. So I
Yeah.
thought that one was cool. And I also felt for Matsumoto, like the Japanese cop that has to follow Nick and Charlie throughout this movie, because I can really tell that he did not like working with them at first because they essentially were disrespecting the investigation process. So I thought that one was a cool aspect of the movie that I enjoyed.
It's interesting because I feel like I like the side characters more than I liked Charlie. Like I love Nikki and I wanted more of Masa. I love seeing him around. I like seeing
Hmm.
him come out of his shell and everything. But yeah, Charlie just didn't really do it for me. He felt like too much of a stereotypical, trying too hard, edgy cop guy.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
He was just
And
like punching people and like breaking the rules the entire time. And it's like, how did you even get your badge, buddy? What are you doing?
exactly, because like I think what was it in the first act, like when they have the internal affairs scene, I think they pretty much, I can't remember the exact words, but they described Nick to be like a bad guy. And like I will get into that in the lowlight section, but they're not far off with their assessment of Nick.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For sure. And like going on with Matsumoto, like I thought he was an interesting character, even though it was a supportive role. Like he always has to put up with Nick and Charlie while he's also dealing with his boss. And I enjoyed like the karaoke scene with Charlie because it showed
Very
like a
funny.
nice fun side to him, even though it looked like he was kind of forced into it, but he kind of was having a good time as well. So that one
I
was
really enjoyed that
cool.
scene. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. That was him
Hmm.
coming out of his shell and everything. That was I really loved the way that he gave him his tie and everything. I love that bit. You know,
Yeah, for
that felt like a real
sure.
thing of respect. And I wanted him to wear the tie for the rest of the movie, but he didn't.
Yeah. And I found it was interesting that he had a son in the movie because I thought maybe
Yeah.
it could have been mentioned earlier, but again, like he didn't really knew the guy, so I get, with him not revealing that information right away.
Genuinely, when he came to Moss's apartment and there was the other guy. I thought that was just his roommate. I thought that was just his like roommate hanging out with him. But yeah, it was his son out of nowhere.
Yeah, for sure. And I also enjoyed him like during like the last act of the movie when he's decides to come out of nowhere to help Nick to catch Sato and the bad guys, like, and he uses the machine guns and all that stuff. So
yeah, he embraced the American way.
Yes, for sure. Also to going on of characters, I enjoyed Sato as the villain. I thought he was intriguing because essentially he's willing to do whatever it takes to achieve his goals, like Nick. And I thought like his introduction, like at the restaurant, was quite suspenseful because you're not sure like where this is going to go with all like the quietness with the lack of score in that scene.
Yeah, that was very striking introduction scene to the villain where he just comes into a restaurant, everybody's eating, and then just shoots the place up. Like that, wow. Like you said, just does whatever he needs to do, does not care.
Yeah. And I thought like the actor Yasuko Matsuda, he did a great job like as Sato. It was quite disappointing to learn about his health issues during production, which I'll mention in the trivia section. But
okay.
I thought given like the circumstances, like he did a great job with his performance.
He was very mysterious and like very much kept like a scary aura around him without revealing too much.
For sure, for sure. Also too, I enjoyed, the action scenes. Like they were one of my highlights with this movie. Particularly for me was the final fight sequence from Nick essentially like going into the raid and then like going after Sato with their fight scene. I thought like those were cool to watch.
I found the third act with the confrontation at the end not the strongest bit. There were like some striking visuals for sure. Like the motorcycle bit, like that was intense. That like scared me. So that was like really solid, but just a typical like the reviewer said, it fell into a lot of with like tropes and everything, and just became a revenge plot at the end. And that kind of lost me a little bit, but there were moments where I'm like, okay, this is cool.
For sure, yeah. And what else too? Yeah, like the raid scene, I think like halfway in the movie, like with Nick, Charlie Matsumoto was quite fun because clearly Nick, he doesn't respect authority. And it's interesting, but not surprising that he decides to steal the money, which Matsumoto notices, but
that was really interesting. He just like took the money and then went, screw you guys, I'm right. And it's like, yeah, but that's in America, that's still tampering with evidence. Like that's still a crime either way. Like you broke a rule there, you broke a rule in America, so you broke a rule you know is a rule, and he's still like, I'm right about it. But I don't know, a means to an end, I guess.
Yeah, because clearly he has no respect for authority. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, because what do you think about the other supporting characters? Like, did you enjoy, what's her name, Joyce? The love interest?
That bothers me. That bothers me because they go across the world to a random town in Japan at a random bar, and of course there's like a blonde white woman who speaks Japanese, and she's from Chicago too. Like, where it felt very placed, you know. I know it was the 80s, so of course she couldn't have been an Asian woman who also spoke English. God forbid. But I don't know. I didn't enjoy her character as much because of that. Like that bit really took me out of it, you know?
Yeah, I thought she was okay. Like I didn't really had any pros and cons. I thought
she didn't really do much too. She like sometimes was there for information and was just there for him to have a woman around. That's how I felt, you know? And it felt really weird, especially with him having like marital troubles at home.
Yeah, I'll get into that in the next section, but
she kind of felt out of place. She felt like she was just stuck in there, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And I enjoyed the production design of this movie, particularly in Japan. Like I enjoyed like the night sequences, I think with the neon type lighting.
That's the Blade Runner.
Yeah, I was getting to that because I think it came out after Blade Runner, so probably still had that influence while
Yeah.
working on this movie.
How many movies do you watch about Americans going to Japan?
Oh gosh,
Random
probably
question, but
not.
it has a point.
Probably not that many in terms of going to Japan specifically.
Okay. Because it seems like every movie about an American going to Japan has to have a chasing sequence through a pachinko parlor. Like, I don't know how many American movies have people running through casinos, but it's just always they have to go, hey, check out this pachinko place. We need to run through this place. Every
Wow.
time. I mean, of course, if I went to Japan, I would go to a pachinko parlor. I'm only human
Yeah.
and I'm a Westerner, but like, just I don't know what the appeal is of running through a pachinko parlor. I guess
Uh,
the lights everywhere.
yeah. Yeah, most likely for sure. That's interesting. Because was there a particular movie that had that trope, or?
Well, I recently watched Lost in Translation with Bill Murray going to
Oh
Japan, and
yeah.
there once again just a random scene in a pachinko parlor. It's always
Wow.
just like the one shot too, just the one. Hey, we need to have a pachinko parlor somewhere in the script.
Yeah, for sure. I haven't seen that movie in like a while. I need to rewatch
It'd be
that
a good
one,
one to
but
rediscover.
yeah, for sure. For sure. And I think for my final point, I enjoyed the score by Hans Zimmer. Like he always delivers with his
Mhm.
scores for his movies. And I like the theme tune. I think like you that's played it in the trailer, and I can't remember what points like the theme is played in this movie. I think halfway through, but I thought that one was cool.
Yeah, the score is definitely one of those things that if it goes unnoticed, it's done its job, which is
Hmm.
unfair to the person who's doing the score, but that's what you do. You know, like if it's bad, then you notice it and that's a problem. And obviously, if it's phenomenal, you point it out like you have. So it's done its job very well. Yeah.
Yeah, because it seemed like he incorporated, I don't know if he actually used like Japanese type of instruments, because I heard some like flute music playing like every now and then. And if it sounded like a flute, I can't really tell. I'm not a musician,
It's
but
fair. There's so many different instruments, you know?
for sure. So were there anything else you want to add for this category?
No, I think I just need to reiterate the fact and my point about bros calling each other babes. I think that's my main takeaway from the movie. I call my friends babe now. Say, hey babe, when are we going out? What are we doing? You know? Not in a weird way. They're just
Yeah,
friends, you know? Charlie and
yeah,
Nikki, they're brothers for life, and that's how they do it.
yeah. And your friends are cool with you saying them, calling them
Oh,
babe,
for
or?
sure not yet, but you know, they're gonna get used to it. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know about if I agree with that, but we'll see. We'll see. So we could get on to the lowlights section, essentially what we did not like about this movie. And for me, we have to talk about Nick as the protagonist because it seemed like they're trying to go for him being like the anti-hero type.
Yeah.
Essentially, he does not like authority and all that stuff. But to be honest, I do not feel anything for him because the way
Yeah.
that internal affairs describe him, like it's accurate and his actions prove their points. Like
He
for
did
him
it.
being a bad guy.
He stole the
Yeah.
money. Like they were
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. And then also too the way that when he comes to Japan, he bosses everybody around, like he owns the place. I'm like, you have no authority here. Like, what are you
Absolutely
doing?
insane the entire time. And it didn't even really feel like he grew or learned to respect the rules or anything because the entire way through he was just brash and abrasive.
Yeah, like maybe like I will say like you kind of feel sorry for him like after Charlie's death, but that was more because of plot convenience, not because of him, growing as a character. But
Yeah. Yeah. Like, and at the end, his final thing that he did was still stealing. He stole Formasa. Like, you proved his
yeah,
point the entire time. You were, it just didn't make any sense to me. The movie should
yeah.
have been about Charlie.
I don't know. I don't know if I care about Charlie either because I feel like he was just there to tag along with Nick and
Yeah. He's a guy just living life in the breeze, you know? My low
yeah.
light was Charlie dying. Partly, that was when the movie really turned for me. But also partly because I don't know if you remember the scene where they cut off his head. Can we spoiler
Yeah,
in this?
it's fun. We go spoilers all the way here.
Okay. When they cut off his head, the practical effects were like a lot too good, and I saw the head come off the neck, and I'm like, whoa, he's really gone.
Yeah, I thought it looked kind of cheesy when they showed that part because it looked like it was clearly a dummy, but maybe the way
Yeah.
they edited it was not noticeable because there are some movies that do similar stuff where it is noticeable, but
I did also feel that, like, genuinely after the point where Charlie died, the movie did take a more somber turn and everything. Like, it
hmm
was pretty jovial, it was fun, it was a buddy cop movie, and I expected a buddy cop movie out of the three of them. But then Charlie died,
hmm
and then it just got into that revenge plot and became too tropey.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I was gonna point out, like, with Nick, when they mention like he has an ex-wife and a kid, I felt like that did not come to play with this movie. I felt like it was just there as background, but
Yeah.
in context of the movie, like they were just forgotten.
It was there to make him like seem like more of a tough, cool guy, that's like doing this for his family, but he's
Yeah,
clearly not. He's doing it for
for sure.
himself. I don't
Yeah.
know. They also felt just kind of shoehorned in.
Yeah, because it would have been better like if he was just a single person, like with no attachments to family or
Yeah.
anything. Because again, he never mentions them in this movie, so
And at the end of it, he doesn't even go back to them. He just goes back to America, Doesn't
yeah,
doesn't make good with his wife, doesn't become a better father, just that's it. This was just one wild
yeah,
summer he had.
yeah, for sure, for sure. And to go off on the point like with him in America at the beginning, I felt like that first act was not necessary in my opinion.
Up
Because I
until which
felt
point, sorry?
so essentially, like with the beginning of the movie, with him in America, essentially, like from the opening sequence till before he leaves, I felt like that could have been cut out in the movie and just focus on him like arriving in Japan.
Yeah, because it
I
didn't
don't
really
know.
do much. It just had him like being a cool guy, doing the motorcycle race, and then showing up late to his appointment where he's being investigated, and then going to a restaurant, and then the action starts. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Cause or maybe like the film could have started like
Mhm.
where he's at the restaurant with Charlie and then we see Sato like come in, does what he does in the movie and then cut to Japan.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then there's a movie.
But
Yeah.
then you wouldn't get that scene where he punches the guy he's captive, like he has captive for no reason. That was very important. That showed a lot of character.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe like they could have just improved the pacing for the first act for me because it felt a bit of a drag for me. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
I,
it
I
is what it
found
is.
the later half to be like a bit slow. Like I
Yeah.
understood that they were doing the revenge bit, but it just felt like it was kind of dragging on.
Yeah, yeah, which kind of brings me on like to my main complaint about this movie is the runtime because the fact that this movie is 2 hours, 5 minutes long, I'm just like no, like this could have been trimmed to like 100 minutes or less than 2 hours because
Mm-hmm.
it had no business being that long.
One of my bigger lowlights for the film was, I have to admit, full disclosure, I
hmm
accidentally watched the movie without subtitles.
Mm,
Realized it about an hour and 40 minutes in, and then just said, it's fine. I'm getting the full Nicky experience. I'm seeing the world through his eyes, and I also don't speak Japanese. So, yeah, that kind of
yeah,
took me away from it, but the acting was solid enough for me to still understand, and context clues, guys chasing after a guy, I get it. They're obviously mad.
for sure. Like I kind of had that experience too. Like when I first watched it on the Cineplex store, so I had to actually turn on the subtitle caption. The translation didn't help much either. So I don't
That's a
know.
problem. I feel like it's a problem specifically with like Japanese things, because I feel like their language has more unsaid things than English does and
Yes.
everything, and a lot more context and a lot more weight.
Yeah.
Like they have like a one word for whenever you're bored and you want to eat something. you know English doesn't have
Yeah.
that. English, you just say, I'm bored, so I'm eating something. But in Japan, that's just one word. They summed it up in
Yeah.
one word.
For sure, for sure. And I was gonna mention, like, it might be a side note that I felt like because I watched these movies recently, it kind of has parallels to Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift, where we have two protagonists, white protagonists, who are often getting into trouble, like with Nick, obviously, like him as a corrupt police officer, and with Sean, I believe that's his name, where he's always getting into troubles with him driving, the legal streetcar racing. And then essentially both characters are thrust into Japan, and where they essentially have to, Nick doesn't have to start over, but like with Sean, he kind of starts over, but they both still like get into trouble doing the exact same thing they were in America. So it was kind of interesting to see those similarities with while watching this movie.
Yeah.
So
Also obvious low light. I didn't appreciate the casual racism that was like going on, but I mean, I guess.
yeah, because if this movie was remade today, I think that would have been addressed for sure.
Yeah, like a lot less slurs and everything.
Yeah, for sure. I think we mentioned Joyce earlier. I thought like their relationship could have been developed more because I didn't really get their chemistry apart what they're both,
They're both
Caucasian
white.
people.
That was it. Yeah.
Yeah.
The guy literally went into a bar and he was like, a white person, I can talk to you. Like, that's how it felt,
Yeah, because there are Japanese people that could speak English.
100%. And you're telling me this place that's dealing with like international business doesn't have any Asian people that speak fluent in English? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
God forbid.
Yeah, for sure.
And how many scenes was Joyce in? It felt like she was in like a handful of scenes, like 3 or 4, like maybe even less.
Yeah, give or take, yeah.
So she didn't really do much.
Yeah, that's why I felt like she was just there.
Yeah.
So. For sure. I thought like when he's burning the money after stealing it to check that it's fake, I thought it was quite terrible because I think like a better example of that was in Rush Hour 2 when they're going into counterfeiting. I forgot the premise for that movie, but essentially in Rush Hour 2, they explained it better where they're saying, oh, like if you burn the money, like if it's burned in red, it's fake and all that stuff. While here with Nick, he just burns the money and then says he's fake, even though he has no experience with counterfeits. So
yeah, we're just supposed to assume that in New York, people are always counterfeiting, and the process is the exact same in Japan, and that we're gonna take his word for it too. That the imprinting is the issue and everything like that. Like I'm not a money forager. I don't know this. I'm not a money forager, so
right.
I can't claim that he's wrong. But it just felt like the writers of the film were just like, "We'll write this in. No one's gonna know."
Probably.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought that with Sato could have been used more since he's the villain than showing the movie from Nick's perspective. I'm not sure, again, because if it's the actor's condition or if that was the way it was written already, regardless, but I thought he could have been used more.
I didn't know he had health conditions, but he wasn't in too many scenes, which I think helped him be the whole like mysterious, ominous mafia boss, that you don't really see and you can't really touch. But that makes sense that like his health conditions prevented him from being in scenes a lot. But I think it worked well for him.
Yeah, for sure. Also too, so there's a moment in the movie where Sato, like during his meeting with the mafia members, he cuts off his own finger. And I just wondered like why he decided to do that when he's planning to double cross them in the first place.
To show his heart, You gotta be cool.
Yeah, because I think like a few weeks ago, I watched like a video from the Insider channel where they had like a guy that used to be part of the Yakuza where he mentioned, going verbatim, that it's custom for Yakuza members to cut off their fingers as a sign of respect.
Yeah.
Something like that. So if we're going off that, he does not respect these guys in the first place with Sato. So what's the point of cutting off the finger in regards to that?
He
Now,
just
I
wanted to
don't
give a little
know.
bit Van Gogh-y, give a gift.
Probably. Also too, like the fight between Sato and Nick at the end, I felt was abruptly cut because it seemed like they weren't sure on how to end it.
Yeah.
So probably that's why they decide, oh, let's not show like the end result. We'll just show like Sato in the police station in custody with Matsumoto and Nick.
I noticed
It's
that
like,
too. Like, I found it very
yeah,
interesting. They're doing all this fighting. They're all sweaty, dirty, bloody. And then just cut to him going into the police department. Everybody's clamoring around, making all this noise, and then like immediately shuts up. And it takes them the entire time of like walking right up to the director for him to turn around. Like, if I was in a loud room and everybody shut up immediately, I'd be like, what's going on behind me? I wouldn't wait until someone's right
yeah,
behind me. It just felt like they were presenting something for the movie's sake, but this is the big guy that you're chasing after. Everybody should be freaking out like, oh my God, we got him. We got him,
yeah, for sure. Because it could have just like showed where like Nick he defeats Sato at the end, and maybe since this was tradition in the 80s, 90s, whatever, they have a helicopter shot of police arriving at the scene, and then I don't know, like they arrest him, and then I don't know, that could be the end of the movie, or
Yeah.
cut to the airport scene with Matsumoto and Nick, and that's pretty much the end of the movie.
Yeah. And I feel like typically in movies like this, like the action movie where you have a character like Nick, usually he goes home and becomes redeemed with his family and everything. Usually. But this one just didn't have it. It just ended.
Yeah,
So I found that a bit
yeah.
weird. And I mean, like, obviously, I feel like it wouldn't have been earned. I felt like if he went back to his family and everything was all better and lovely again, it would feel weird. But it also felt weird that it didn't happen. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Both
For
options were
sure.
wrong, and he still fumbled the landing, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's why too they could have worked on like Nick's character more, like be more well-rounded than just him like doing bad stuff from beginning to end. So that's
Yeah,
why I did not feel anything for him for this movie. Even though
yeah,
we are supposed to, I didn't feel anything for him at all.
I
Yeah.
agree. Yeah, I'm still upset about Charlie's death. I miss him every day.
I mean, yeah, it's sad, but again, I didn't feel for him either because he was just a tag along with
Also,
Nick. So
Lowlight, his death scene was very stupid. He just chased after the guy for like 10 minutes while Nick is screaming,
yeah,
don't do it. Like, have some brain in your head, brother. Like, just don't. He went way too far and he got himself killed.
yeah, yeah, I agree with that for sure. And I think for my final point for this category is that the opening and the closing credits, like with the song choices, I thought were cheesy. Very,
It was the
very
80s,
80s.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. So is there anything else you want to add?
Um, no, I think it was a pretty good film. I did like it. It was a good time, but the ending felt a little bit weak. But that was, yeah, my takeaway from it.
Yeah, for sure. So we could get on to the trivia section. So I was surprised to learn about this, but apparently the plot for this movie was originally supposed to be for Beverly Hills Cop 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Beverly Hills
I
Cop. Is
mean,
that who was in that film again?
Eddie Murphy.
Yeah, the Eddie Murphy film. Okay. Eddie Murphy
Yeah.
going to Japan?
Yeah, but again, though, for that movie would not make sense since this is called Beverly Hills Cop, and Eddie Murphy, with his character, is not a Beverly Hills Cop, but
Yeah. That's interesting.
yeah, for sure. And so another fun fact, so when the crew ran, they say, for a few minutes over their allotted time at any given location in Japan, not only they were told to leave, a man physically walked in front of the camera and forbade them from continuing filming.
That is funny.
Yeah.
He just said, stop filming. Stop. You're done. Like, I get
Yeah.
that budget constraints usually stop that, but like another random man stopping that?
Yeah, that's wild. But I guess that happens in the 80s though, but
Yeah.
yeah. Also too, so Jan de Bond, he replaced Howard Atherton as the director of photography. So Atherton shot most of the film, but he got so frustrated in Japan that he quit. And then de Bond was then brought in to finish the rest of the film and received official credit. And then Atherton, he was credited for additional photography.
Mm,
Interesting.
okay.
That is interesting. Yeah. So also to Ridley Scott, he said in a audio commentary for Paul Schrader's Mishima, A Life in Four Chapters. So Ridley Scott said he vows not to shoot in Japan again due to high costs and excessive bureaucratic wrangling that was incurred during location filming there.
That makes sense.
Yeah, especially given that, if they ran over time, there a person would just come up and say, "Hey, no filming." So I get that frustration.
I feel like Japan is like a very closed off space. Like, I just recently they've opened up their borders and everything to people traveling to the country again, you know? So
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. Also too, so this film marked the first collaboration between Ridley Scott and Hans Zimmer. So Zimmer would go on to score a number of his films, including Hannibal, Gladiator, Black Hawk Down, Thelma Louise, and Matchstick Men. Interesting. So just a side note, are you excited for the sequel for Gladiator?
that Gladiator was the film with who again, sorry?
Russell Crowe.
Yeah, that's okay. I don't think I've seen the first, but I do enjoy the whole Spartan aesthetic thing and that whole theme. I might give it a watch.
Yeah. Because I think I might have watched this movie on TV like long time ago. I definitely need to rewatch it, but I typically not like a sandals and swords type of person with these movies.
That's
But
fair. Yeah.
I'll give it a watch for sure. I'll check it out. Hopefully
Is
it's good. But
is that the no the sequel? I could be like totally wrong on this, but the
yeah.
guy from Ted Lasso, Roy Kent, I think his name is like Brett Goldstein or something like that. Is he in the film as well? Gladiator 2?
No, not for the sequel because I think
Or am I thinking of a
going
Marvel thing?
that's probably Marvel because I
I
think
think so.
going off yeah, going off the top of my head, I think Denzel Washington is cast, and then there's a bunch of people that I know them like by face, but I just can't put the name to it.
That's
So
fair. Yeah.
for sure. Oh, I think but Pedro Pascal apparently is in the movie.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So it will be interesting to see what he comes up. And just as a note that by the time we're recording this, they announced the cast for the sequel. So we have not seen the sequel at this point. So hopefully it's good. Again,
Fingers
you never
crossed.
know. For sure. So there has been some casting notes. So before Michael Douglas was considered, so there's a bunch of people that were considered for the role, which includes Jeff Bridges, Kevin Costner, Willem Dafoe, Richard Dreyfuss, Mel Gibson, Michael Keaton, Michael Nouri, Ron Perlman, Kurt Russell, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, Patrick Swayze, Peter Weller, and Bruce Willis.
It's a lot of people. A lot of big names.
Yeah, for sure. Because I'm wondering though, like, if
Um,
Michael Douglas was not cast, like, who would fit the role? Again, this is the 80s, so
yeah. Not a single woman named in that cast at all. That's
no, this was the 80s. They wanted a guy for sure.
that's yeah. Wild. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think like Michael Keaton would be an interesting choice, but because I feel like with Schwarzenegger and Sly Stallone, since like they have done similar movies, like maybe like that would be quite easier to see. But
I'm not a
I
big
don't know.
Stallone person myself.
Yeah, you're more Schwarzenegger.
Um, If the choice is between the two, yes. I like some of the other actors that you named there for
Mm-hmm.
sure. Like Ron Perlman's
Yeah.
really interesting. He's really good in stuff
Oh
that he
yeah.
does.
Yeah, he would be an interesting choice for this movie. Yeah. For sure. So the studio, they favored Michael Douglas due to his relationship with producers Sherry Lansing and Stanley R. Jaffe. So there you have it.
So it's a who you know, not what you know.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So at the end of the movie, so Nick, he apprehends Sato, although there is a moment when he is torn between arresting and killing him. So Ridley Scott, he shot an alternative ending where Nick, he kills Sato.
I don't know how I feel about that. Because if he kills
Yeah.
Sato, then he just goes to jail. And then what happens at the end of that, you know?
Yeah, but again, it follows his characteristics because he essentially didn't care for the whole time through this movie. So
I think if he killed the guy, he wouldn't have been going on the plane back to America. So, like, I think the movie ends with him in Japan in a jail cell. So I guess it's a good thing he didn't kill him, but,
yeah.
avenge Charlie. Maybe that's how I'm feeling too,
Yeah, yeah, for sure,
It
for
did
sure.
look really close there with like the motorcycle bit, and he was gonna like put his face to the wheel. Like that was
Yeah.
scary.
Oh yeah, for sure. So probably yeah, they made the right call like with the theatrical cut, even though they should have showed the ending of the fight. But yeah,
That explains also why it like felt so abrupt.
yeah, for sure. Because they could not make that call, I guess, by the time it came out.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I don't know. And so also too, so the scene where Charlie sings where they do karaoke with Matsumoto apparently was not in the script. So Garcia, he conceived this scene to add extra emotional involvement to his character before he was brutally murdered in the following scene. I thought that's interesting. So I would say
Yeah.
that was my favorite moment with Charlie throughout this movie.
Yeah.
So
Just shows what a great guy he was, just loved having fun, loved life.
for sure. Until he died, but yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. And for a last note, so I think I mentioned that with the actor that played Sato, Yushako Matsuda, this was his last film role. So he apparently he knew he had bladder cancer and that his condition would be aggravated by acting in the movie. But then he decided to do this movie anyways, unbeknownst to Ridley Scott, reportedly saying, quote, "This way I will live forever." And then on November 6, 1989, less than 7 weeks after the film's American premiere, he passed away at the age of 40. And the film is dedicated to his memory.
Oh, that's
Yeah, because it was just sad, like, because of his condition. But regardless, he did an amazing job with this movie.
yeah, that's wild that he was acting with this condition and everything.
Yeah, for sure. And lastly, I usually ask this question: should this movie be rediscovered? So, Khalif, do you want to answer that question?
Um, if you like cops from New York in the 80s doing rough and tough, off the book things, then yes. If you have a casual interest in Japan, maybe. If you're a big action person, this one might fall short for you because it's a bit samey to other stories you might have seen. But I think it was a good time. It was a good, fun cop movie. Yeah.
All right, so for me, I am going to have to say no as a whole.
Fair.
I
Very
feel
fair.
like I feel like I've been kind of picky like this season in terms of my answer for this question. But I'm going to say as a whole no because for me it was way too long with this movie. They needed to tighten up the pacing,
Yeah, that's true.
remove like the first act of him in America and like the fact too that Nick as the protagonist did not work for me because again I did not feel anything for this character at all, and I felt like just based off the trailers, this movie was kind of playing it too safe for me in regards to tone. But I will say this, like, watch it for the performances from the supporting cast and also to check out Hans Zimmer's score. So
yeah,
that's what I have to say about this movie.
it's very fair.
And
I like that.
yeah, and I should have mentioned as a low light that the theatrical trailer for this movie essentially spoiled the movie because it showed the whole movie. So yeah.
I've been watching trailers less and less for films. I feel like going into it without any pre-knowledge is more rewarding, or you get a better picture of it. You're not warned about anything, because in a movie like this, as soon as you see someone chasing after someone, you go revenge plot, someone dies. Like it does give away too much too easily.
Yeah, for sure. But again, though, like the point of the trailers, like they need to like tease people like what to expect without revealing too much. And again, if you don't market your film right, then it is what it is.
It could be a problem with the movie of just that's all there was, like the trailers was just the highlights.
Yeah, that too, most likely. So that pretty much concludes this episode of the podcast. So where can people find you, Khalif? Anything you want to plug in?
You can find me on this episode right here. I had a great time. Thank you for showing me around and having me on the show. I want to plug in the Rediscovered Movies podcast. I was a big fan of the Colossal episode. That was a really good movie. Side note, rediscover that one.
All right. Thank you very much, Khalif. So you can find me on Instagram, Twitter. I'm on YouTube, Linktree at Nomfanelo. You can find the podcast on Instagram, Twitter, Linktree, and YouTube at RD Movies Pod. And you could, for those of you that use Spotify, you could answer the feature question and poll, and please rate the podcast. And also too, for Apple Podcaster users, leave a review there and rate the podcast. It'll help with the algorithm. You could also submit questions, comments, and suggestions by email, which is rediscoveredmovies@gmail.com, or you could send a short voice message on Spotify for podcasters, which was formerly anchor.fm at RD Movies Pod, to be featured for the after show, which will air after the season finale. So, Khalif, do you have any final notes you want to share before we sign off?
Guys, start calling your guy friends babe. Bring it back. It was cool back in the 80s, and the age of bro is done. Yeah.
For sure. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to this episode of the podcast, and catch you on the next one.